You're listening to Raising Anchor, a Rhode Island FC podcast. We're glad you're here. It's so funny because looking back now on the fact that we have to do this entire episode all over again because I didn't understand how inputs work, it just makes you kind of reflect on making sure you sharpen the axe before you cut down the tree or whatever that saying is, because here we are again, getting ready to go at episode 2 of Raising Anchor. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Did you update the patch notes for this then? So this is like episode 2.151
-A. Yeah. I mean, honestly, you joke, but in the backlogs on the meta, you do kind of do those watermarks and tags. So yeah, there will be an additional besides just the 002.
You're gonna have to work on the SEO for this one.
Exactly. It's funny. I think now about all the fun content that listeners aren't going to get because of a microphone recording mistake that we didn't catch until in post. What do you think is the biggest mistake, or what do you think is the biggest regret that we'll have that the listeners will never know?
It's not often that you peak in your second episode, so I don't see how that's going to work out for us, especially since no one's going to hear it.
I regret to spoil, but also tease, because we're not going to go back over it. I regret that we had decided and figured out for all time who the GOAT in basketball was between LeBron and Jordan, and we had decided it through Space Jam quality, and that was the deciding factor. No matter what points are put up on the court, it's always going to live on who produced the better Space Jam, and the listeners are never going to get to hear that debate.
We really must have went on some tangents. I wasn't really sure if you were making this up to begin with, but I think I remember that now.
Were you drinking that night?
Absolutely not.
Your eyes say a different story right now, sir.
Drinking tonight. Just water last time. Just water.
So again, welcome to round 2 of episode 2. On our last pod, we had done the introductions around our kind of roots in Rhode Island in terms of soccer history and the richness that has existed before ourselves. And so we thought today we would take our listeners on a journey through the understanding and explanation of the league that we'll be joining in 2024, and that is the USL. Jason, pop quiz, do you know what the USL stands for?
United Soccer League?
I like how you had to say that with the curiosity if you may not have gotten that right.
There's sometimes you just never think about things, right? You just take them for granted. Like, oh, hey, USL, it's a soccer league. What does it stand for? I don't know. I just work here.
It's funny. Did you know what the USL stood for before we started getting attached to Rhode Island FC?
Probably.
Did you? Because I honestly, before I started doing the research, I was like, this is like the United States League. That makes the most sense. Why even use the word soccer in a soccer league? That's how poor I was in bringing competent content to the podcast. So that's where I'm at.
Oh, it's not the URL, the United Rocket League?
That's a different type of sport. But so we'll be taking listeners in on today the USL, and then also we want to kind of go over briefly the dynamics of the USSF pyramid in general, kind of how the different divisions make up professional and amateur soccer, to kind of give a very base understanding of what we can expect and how we anticipate that Rhode Island FC will participate in the league itself. And it couldn't be better timing. Even though this is a re-recording, some very interesting news dropped earlier this week. Do you want to catch the listeners up?
Spoiler alerts.
So the Athletic, I think, was the first to drop it around the fact that the USL is looking to potentially vote on a pro-rel system here in America. And if you have been following soccer at all in the last 20 or 30 years, you would know that this conversation comes up as kind of like I don't know, an April Fool's joke every year within the communities. It's that thing when all of the other leagues that have it, which is basically the rest of the planet, when they go through their own relegation at the end of their seasons, it comes up as a hot topic for us to say, hey, why don't we have that in America? And it looks like USL is seriously exploring a potential approach to moving their three systems, which we'll talk about in a bit, into a pro-rel system. So there's not much to say yet. The article was just saying that they have an open mind. They're looking to explore possibilities, and that if they do bring it in, it's not going to show up tomorrow. But what are your initial impressions of pro? I never thought we would have a pro-rel conversation in this pod, at least not until we needed to stall for time and have an episode in between seasons or something, and hey, let's talk. What could it be like? But it may show up now. So what are your impressions of pro-rel overall?
As someone who watches and enjoys a lot of European soccer, I mean, I'm totally for it. It adds it adds tension to every game, right? There, you don't end up having those dead rubbers towards the end of the season where it's neither of us made the playoffs. We're just going for clean sheets or something, upping our passing or completion rates. There's really no point to the game. This added layer, creates an excitement that honestly sometimes is more exciting than title race, especially with the way a lot of the giants have kind of started to pull away. There's a lot of huge moments, let's say for instance in the Premier League, but often maybe 2-3 times in the last 10-15 years does it really come down to the last day or so?
I can only ever think of the Man City QPR game where...
Yeah, so that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But then, some of these relegation battles can stretch out for the last few games and add a lot of extra tension. And more it doesn't let you rest on your laurels and sit we won a few championships back in the day, and now we can just milk our fan base, and maybe one day we'll get lucky and get a good academy player again or something, build a team around them. But we're not going to really put the effort in there to really go for anything more than just jersey sales.
So I don't disagree with anything, and I often also find myself more paying attention to the table, watching the games, either whether it's the highlights of teams that I would normally not follow in the middle of the season. And it is that despair. I one of my favorite things when the World Cup is on is when it's in the knockout rounds and the cameraman pans to and it's always the most beautiful, but it's the crying woman of the club that's losing, and you can see that every decision that she ever made, she just hates her life. The rest of her life will never be as good because she's seeing her team get knocked out of the World Cup.
So why did I pay $500 for this ticket?
World Cup? I mean, that's 5,000 maybe, but yeah, no, and so I love it. I love the drama. I love following clubs that I'm not really in tune with, and there can be some upsets. There can be Cinderella stories in there, right? But having said that, is that good for USL? And I know we're kind of leading the witness. We're talking about before we even break down the league itself, but this isn't Division I soccer right now. And their model, if based on what the Athletic is reporting, is this is a viable path forward to find interdependence from MLS, because they will never uproot MLS as a Division I. But with pro-rel in place, they believe they can offer a different type of experience or excitement that would then transition them into some sort of D1 product. And what I think they're hoping is to force MLS to play within the system that the USSF would have to define. And that's great and all if it works. And I hope it works. I mean, we're investing time and energy into this club, and we want the league to also be successful. But I can't help but wonder, if the league is ready now for this kind of work. So do you think, not knowing the history of pro rel across the centuries of soccer that have existed in other countries, do you think that this is something this league could handle right now?
Like, I don't know enough about the USL to say that can they handle it or not. But like talking about like the trajectory and like, is it good for it? I think it is absolutely good for the USL, because the reality is MLS is top dog in the States, right? You know, it's not like magically the money is going to all of a sudden be there for all these different teams. So they have to differentiate themselves and say, why would you watch this other league when you can watch this other one that's better? Well, because this one plays by a different set of rules that's more akin to global soccer, right? So you have that added layer of excitement that you cannot, like I said earlier, you cannot rest on your laurels. So if they can, maybe that wouldn't make them grow to the same way, like as big as the MLS, but it would definitely get the MLS watching and be like, these guys, are maybe taking away from our share of the cookie. And the dream at that point maybe would be, like you said, maybe down the line in the future, kind of get an actual soccer pyramid the way that you have in England, where, you know what, these contracts, when you bought these, MLS teams like 30, 40 years ago or whatever, like, sorry, but like we are, we're going to this new future where, I mean, it's the American dream, right? You start from this little, your little team that you start out.
How dare you? How dare you invoke the American dream? Oh, man. So, hey, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I do think that we will talk about it some more. Before we jump in, though, and I see, this is the problem when you have to jump show notes and you already had this show done once. You actually owe me an apology that we have to go back and cover from the last time we recorded this. So if you remember in episode 1, you had brought up some breaking journalism about Brett Johnson, one of the founders of Rhode Island FC. And I had told you at the time I hadn't heard that information and I wasn't really sure. And so I did some digging. And I don't want to get into a fight with one of the local journalism organizations here in Rhode Island right out the bat, but I have to kind of challenge some of what they are reporting these days. There's definitely already been this inclination that they don't want to see soccer be successful in Rhode Island. But so for those that didn't read the article, and this is a little dated now, but Brett Johnson was accused of kind of lying and that he is not who we think he is, and that because of that, this club is kind of being led down the path of doom and gloom. And when I looked into the allegations, the interesting thing was Go Local Prov did not have anything wrong. What they reported was accurate, but it was kind of like that spin and like the sauce they put on top. So yes, Brett Johnson does not have a controlling interest as a director of Ipswich Town. But you know what he does have? He has 1% ownership. And I don't know about you,
Nice.
Jason, but I don't have 1% ownership of Ipswich Town. Do you?
I do not.
So could you at all influence the decisions with 0%?
Unlikely.
Right. And maybe Brett's not really doing that himself, but he at least has his foot in a door that we can't even get into that room where that door is located. And so when I continued to look through the elements, so the Tucson piece in Arizona, where the club had been collapsed, yes, he couldn't get the Tucson project off the ground, but he sold the rights or was a part of the acquisition plan to give it to Phoenix Rising. So you know what I mean? Like, so now he has a partnership or like he's kind of on like the board of directors, like kind of influencing the path forward that Phoenix Rising may take if they could try to get an MLS expansion, which we'll talk about in this episode. So that was the second one. And then when you look at the rest of it, it's just a guy lying on his CV to look impressive on a third-party recruiting website. And I hate to tell you this, Go Local, but like everybody does that. If you go look at my CV on LinkedIn, it has words that I did not know how to spell before I looked them up. It has responsibilities that have been greatly exaggerated. They're not lies, but they're not exactly the truth either. And that's so that if one day someone comes knocking, I can say, "Oh yes, please, pick me up for this much money." And please don't go comment on my LinkedIn. I don't need that kind of attention right now. But it's just it was kind of insane to think that all of the stadium's problems were going to be built off of the fact that they looked at this gentleman's resume and said, "Hey, no, this isn't going to happen." So how do you, now that the air's been cleared, do you still think he is peddling snake oil?
No. I mean, I fall myself, like many other people. I'm willing to admit it. I've fallen into the trap. You see something and then you don't process it too much. You start to read it down on the stadium. You're like, "Oh, this guy, he's ruining it." And I didn't, mean to think that he was ruining it per se, but it, like you said, some of the language they used, the more I looked at it, I was kind of afterwards, just, it's a learning process. Maybe don't bring breaking news unless it's been vetted.
Yeah,
got to keep that one in the chamber,
Exactly. We will go for Brett for an interview at some point later, and he'll be like, "I heard the first episode. I have no interest. I didn't listen to the second episode. You guys are crocs."
I'll wear a mask. You won't recognize me.
It's your voice, Jason. It's your voice. So I just wanted to bring that up, and then of course, in other news that is no longer breaking either, since we recorded this, stadium's back on. Surprise, they found the capital that they needed to move forward with some of the next steps. By no means have they completed the entire picture of what they do need, but crisis has been averted. Funds are moving through to the anticipated unlock for those grants that we had talked about in the earlier episode, and it's not all doom and gloom. So I think all that being said and done, sometimes the news can move fast. Sometimes it doesn't move at all, and I'm just looking forward to us continuing to marshal down that path for a 2024 inaugural season. So, you ready to jump into USL?
Let's do it. I'm glad we just don't have to keep bringing up is that stadium get done or not?
Oh, it's gonna happen again in 2 more months. Someone's gonna post actually. So we can see this is again how fast news breaks. There was some Russian billionaire. I don't know if he was Russian. His last name was Russian. Some billionaire wanted to buy the PASOK Stadium before it gets demolished.
I did see that. Yeah.
For hundreds of millions of dollars. And the city said, "No, we already have secured the funds to move forward with the expansion or the demolition and construction of a new high school," which the city needs, fully disclosed. That is a thing that needs to happen. I just find it funny that why didn't we just call that guy up real fast and go, "Hey, there's another sporting opportunity that you can invest those millions of dollars in, and we can put your name, Tidewater Stadium presented by." And so I don't know what happened with that part, but again, just more kind of conversation where immediately people attached, "Oh, you want something, go to Tidewater." So we're not out of the fire yet. I'm sure there's going to be many more conversations. Any slight delay, even if it's weather based, we're going to see problems down the road, but we'll get through them. So, all right. USL. What is it? And what is it not? I think that's going to be the important part of this conversation too. So USL today, what we are going to be seeing our team play in terms of competitive soccer will be in the USL Championship, or what we call Division 2, Tier 2. We'll probably use those terms interchangeably here. And it is the step right below MLS when we talk about professional product. What's really interesting about USL is I knew that it had been around for a little while, but I didn't know or understand the infrastructure of the league as a whole and how long it had actually been around. Founded in 1986, we didn't see the change as we understand it today into championship until it first kicked off as that pro in 2011, and then it became the championship in 2018. So founded in 86, became pro in 2011, championship in 2018. So the name, maybe it'll change again in, 5-6 years? Maybe when relegation and promotion comes in, it'll be a new conversation. But what was fascinating to me is it wasn't always Division 2. And I knew of another league because of a very famous soccer player, and I knew that they performed under the MLS, and I also knew that there was this kind of entity that competed at one point. There was a longer or an older product. And do you remember what that was?
We're talking about the Nassau?
You were talking about that Nassau.
New York Cosmos.
So that is honestly the only team that I knew. I knew that Pele had made this move at the end of his career, kind of like another South American star who's moving over to North America now, and that he had played on this team. But I didn't know where. I didn't know who they were. And so in doing some research, and then it dawned on me, I've heard of Nassau before several other times. Do you remember some of like the big names that used to exist like back in the 70s and 80s in terms of teams?
Didn't Ray Hudson play for some Florida Lauderdale?
So he did. We'll talk
something?
about that. We'll talk about that. But I'm talking about like just like teams that exist still today that were a part of the Nassau back in the 70s and the 80s.
I think there's like one or two USL teams that have some roots in history that maybe go way back.
They do.
Don't think I'd name off the top of my head, though.
No, it's all good. So the teams I was thinking of were the Seattle Sounders and the Vancouver Whitecaps. Those were Nassau teams that had played for a very long time standing up the Nassau. The Nassau folded at one point because that's just kind of how, if it wasn't, football or baseball at that time, sports came and they went. And then it kind of came back into the light. But at that point, the Whitecaps and the Sounders had tried to move on to other products. And we'll talk more about like the transition of teams between these leagues in a bit. So the Nassau comes back around, and in 2016, it was still Division II, but the weird thing is that it only had 12 clubs left at that time. So Division II, 12 clubs, Nassau, and then USL is coming in hot with 29 clubs. And to me, it's always really interesting because, again, not knowing this league's history, I thought it was like a few teams making some cross-country travel and trying to establish themselves. I had no idea the position that USL was already in back in 2016. And so the year that really matters in USL's history, though, is 2017. And that's because the Nassau organization dropped down to 8 teams due to financial trouble with some of their other clubs. And while the USL had expanded to 30, the reason that USL moved into Division II wasn't the success of their product, but it was because Nassau failed to field enough teams to be in that league minimum. So as a result, the USSF sanctioned that USL would automatically be brought up into Division II, but only on the condition or understanding if Nassau could get their act together, then it would rebalance back out the way it was before. And unfortunately, the Nassau did not get their act together, and we saw the decommissioning or debranding, I don't know what you want to call the closure of some really, really interesting and really good clubs because of that. And I don't know why, and I'd love to talk to a historian. So if there's anyone listening that knows more about this or knows a person that knows about this, I'd love to understand why at that time in 2018 when Nassau folded, why they didn't bring those clubs along with them. Like were all of them, some do come along, but were they just financially insolvent that they couldn't just combine the leagues?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what happened there. Was there some weird legal contracts they were tied up with, and maybe they were already treading water that USL didn't see it as like a profitable endeavor to like
just
bring
a bunch
them
of
along.
leopard clubs like, oh, we don't want to touch your infection.
Yeah, they're gonna bring us down. We don't want that.
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to know and understand more about that. But so after they fold, 2019 is kind of where we see the golden years of USL establish its dominance, and the system expands to 36 teams across which we have 2 conferences, like defined conferences at that point, and it is the top of Tier 2. It's the only Tier 2 league with 36 clubs. And what's even crazier is that because there was so much interest at that time, they even then started like the next step. And this is where I give them credit for having the vision to do what they're doing all the way up now to this pro rel conversation is they created the expansion of USL 1. So now we're moving into Division 3 territory. And I apologize because you're going to start hearing numbers that don't match the tier. And like that's a problem that I think all soccer has in the world. But so you've got USL Championship Tier 2, 36 clubs, and then you have USL 1 expanding into Division 3 with 10 clubs, and it's just insane. Like this, they're going from small time bids on opening, stadiums in parking lots, or excuse me, having games in parking lots, to securing stadium rental contract rights, and even thinking about developing stadiums for clubs that would be coming in, something that was never really a requirement beforehand. And then, fast forward, of course, there's some disruption because of COVID, but we see in 2020 through 2022, the club kind of fluctuates from 35 clubs down to 27 clubs. And of course, there's still some inconsistency with club performance. So some of them have folded, some of them have been put on hiatus. But the more successful story at that point in time is you see that they have won, like some of the clubs have won MLS expansion bids. So, and that continues to be a conversation or a talking point that exists still to this day. So you see clubs like Orlando City, you see clubs like Nashville that spend some time in USL, but then boom, they go and get their shot. They get their call up, if you will, into MLS, almost begging again. Like these are like Cincinnati, right? Like this is a club that didn't exist on the radar, and now suddenly it's packed with 50,000 in attendance in some of its bigger games. And it's at the top of like soccer passion and attention right now. Same thing with like the new hotness in St. Louis. These were all that one wasn't, but these were potentially USL teams just 3 or 4 years ago. So again, defending Pro Rel here, the ability to suddenly swing violently into the positive or down into the darkness and the depth below, like that could be an exciting thing for fans and the communities that are attached to these clubs.
Yeah, the cynic in me wondered would somehow those clubs like appeared out of nowhere, got a lot of support, and then just jumped in. Was like that, like, let's test the water with here. Like, maybe their intention was always to try and get to MLS, and it was just like, hey, if not, maybe we'll just have a USL team that makes some money.
Right, and in all honesty too, like I mean, there's still some clubs that I think are trying to vie for those final expansion bid products.
Yeah, I mean Sacramento feels like there's news about them every few weeks.
But it's never good news at this point, right? Like you hear like, oh, they butchered their chances. They dropped the ball on their because the way I understand it, Sacramento Republic had an expansion right secured, but it had conditions under certain requirements, like there needed to be an X amount of available capital to fund into the performance of the team, and then of course they had to have their stadium secured with in building by a certain date. And something happened with their ownership group. Someone didn't agree with someone. I don't know, or maybe someone kind of like inflated what they could do, and then suddenly Sacramento Republic is on the outside looking in, and like I don't hear anything positive about that club outside of their performance on the field these days. So it's really interesting, like what will happen with them in the future. There are other clubs that should most definitely like make bids. So I think Phoenix Rising continues to try, and I think it's a good market to potentially have an MLS club. But the one that really impresses me in terms of its tenure, its attendance, and its performance is Louisville. Louisville, like if you do any research on Louisville, like they are ready already. They have a soccer-specific stadium that can be expanded to make whatever attendance you need. They've got like, I guess there's nothing else going on in Louisville, so like they're the top of the sporting walk. I don't know if there's like anything collegiate at that point, but like they could make a viable case. If Columbus Crew can be in MLS, and I don't say anything bad about Columbus Crew as a team, I just mean like a Columbus located club can be in MLS. Like there's no reason Louisville could not also be in there. So there's arguments across the board that expansion is great, but not at the cost of like the great products that we already have. We see in USL today.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those smaller markets end up being some of the best because you get that like really good support locally. People, really gravitate towards their teams. There's maybe not a lot of other competition, maybe just some local college or something. And especially like, the environment at soccer games can be infectious and just a fun place to go and like hang out.
Agreed. So let's deep dive into some of these clubs. So currently, as of 2023, there are 24 clubs in the league. There are the same East and West conferences with 12 clubs in each conference. I'll be really curious to see how Rhode Island FC shakes things up because they're coming in next year as the as a solo entity. There's no other additional club coming in on the other side. But within the 24 clubs, there's also 2 teams that are on hiatus until certain times, and I don't really know what that means. So OK City Energy is waiting on some sort of stadium deal. I don't know why they can't just play at like Joe Schmo's local high school in the interim. And then there's another team that is in the process of relocating. I haven't heard good news lately. I don't know what that means for the club, but Austin Bold FC, which when Austin arrived in MLS, it wasn't the expansion of that USL club. So they kind of decided, well, we need to pull up stakes and move somewhere else. They were potentially relocating to Fort Worth so they could stay in that kind of Texas arena. But I haven't heard much, and there's nothing really on their socials. There's not really a lot going on in like their club news. So I don't know if they're going to sell their franchise rights to maybe another group or something like that. And then so with those being said, like the 2 that are in limbo, there are those 3 expansion teams that are coming to the league as well. So one of them is us, Rhode Island FC, and then there's 2 additional teams, one in Milwaukee and one in Iowa. And I don't know, there's already an Iowa team in the lower divisions called the Menace. So I don't know if it's going to be the like Des Moines Menace or if it's going to be some sort of other Iowa club. But that's going to be our USL championship makeup for 2023.
We also have, I forgot, did you see this? We're getting an Arkansas team as well, just announced yesterday.
See, this is the thing. You do show notes, and then the world moves on without you.
Well, you know, that was episode 2.0. This is like 2.11.
I know, but I didn't update the notes. I'm running
I forgot.
with old notes.
I saw this, and then I just looked it up to confirm it to make sure.
Is it from USL? Is the press release from USL? Because if it's from Go Local Prov, we have problems.
No, but there are multiple sites reporting it.
Okay, well let's break the hot breaking news.
USL Soccer League announced
from now.
Wednesday morning an exclusive partnership with USL Arkansas, a group that will bring a professional men's and women's club to Northwest Arkansas.
Northwest. I have terrible geography. What is this? Is that I only know of Little Rock in Arkansas.
Yeah, I'd have to bring up a map.
I mean, you've got the computer over there. You've got the talent. Do we know what that may be, or like is there, listeners, can you beat Jason to the search? Is there a city that makes sense?
Is this some sort of AR episode? Like, users interact? I don't know. Bentonville, maybe? Springdale?
I don't. You could make up a city and I wouldn't know if it's in that state or not. So, okay. Well, we've got some homework to figure that out then in the future.
But yeah, looking like 2026 is what they're saying.
Okay, so still nothing
still
near
a bit of
as
a ways
close
off.
as the other 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so then just kind of breaking down again some more of the dichotomy of the clubs and the USL Championship itself. The current league champions, San Antonio FC. So belated congratulations on winning in 2022. You're not going to win it anymore once we come in the league. So sorry, you're going to have to deal with that on your own. And then it was really interesting. I wanted to kind of see who were the pedigrees, like who were the ones that had the most trophies, the most hardware in their cabinets. And it's actually a tie at the top of the league. Knowing, again, less than 2 decades worth of time as a league, but Louisville and Orlando City have 2 wins each as champions, but Orlando City no longer in the league. So I feel like they shouldn't even get, like, they can get it as a, like, asterisk.
How does that work? Like, remember when did the Supersonics ever win anything?
Well, I mean, if a club wins, they
supposedly
still
OKC claims that. I don't know how that works.
They still go down in history as the winner. It's just like, do you talk about it anymore? Like, why talk about ghosts, right? But yeah, so back to USL. We don't count Orlando City anymore. Louisville are the champs supreme, and so that's what's going on. As far as some other fun facts that I can say after doing 6 minutes of Google research, in my spare time, New Mexico is one of the newest clubs in the groupings, and they have some of the highest attendance right now. Their record this year does not reflect those standings because they just I think got across the playoff line, but they've been struggling this year. But they're producing almost 10,000 in attendance a week, and then you've got some of the other clubs like. Which I said it so many times wrong, and then I finally was like, I'm not confident on the different pronunciation types you have. I'm gonna just like do one of those phonetic like pronunciations on Google. So I thought it was Ludun or London, but like said funny. But no, it's Loudon. It's Loudon. Like that's they want to get loud and Loudon. So Loudon United, which is the last kind of feeder club. And we'll talk about that in a second when we talk about like players and the talent pools. But they're one of the last affiliation teams in the league, and they're attached to DC United. As you know, but for our listeners, up until this year, in fact, one of the things that fed the amount of clubs that we had in the league was all of the MLS 2 groups, which were like your Galaxy 2. Seattle 2, Atlanta 2. For some reason, Vancouver Whitecaps had a 2.
Yeah, it was number 4. It's weird. I don't know where 2 and 3 went.
I sometimes I know you want to have a youth academy. I know you want to grow talent, and rightfully so. I think Vancouver produced Alphonso Davies, so it's not like they didn't do things. But sometimes I wonder if as a financial operator, they look at the club and oh, this is just the biggest sink of money that we're never gonna be able to splash out of, and yeah,
all you need is one big one.
And you know what? That's true. I guess Davies may have paid for Whitecaps too for 10 years. So I redact that. I pull that statement back. It's no longer makes sense. So thank you for bringing me to the light. But yeah. So in terms of kind of what the team dynamic is here, and I'm going to challenge you in a second to see how many of the clubs you can actually name. I will give you a hint. Actually, no, I'm going to save it. I'm going to save the biggest rivalry for the end. So, first of all, Jason, can you even tell me who is at the top of the table right now?
Top of the table, USL.
You can either give me a conference.
Colorado Springs Switchbacks.
So, the Switchbacks are not at the top of the table.
Las Vegas Lights.
They are in dead last. Well, they're in dead last with the exception of that trash team down in Connecticut. Hartford Athletic.
R.I.P.
Nobody cares about them. Tab Ramos leaves, and so does the rest of their spirit. But so you've named a couple, but the correct answer is right now the Pittsburgh Riverhounds are back at the top of the table.
I heard about them,
but they made a deep. They beat the Revs recently in the Open Cup. Or did they get knocked out in that game? Oh man, I just said a fact that I can't back up. I think they won the Revs, and then they got knocked out the next round. I'm sticking to that.
I think it was some other Midwest team that knocked them out.
Works for me. Who follows the Open Cup? After the USL Cups are gone, it doesn't matter.
Who cares?
Yeah, the fun clubs are out. The Cinderella story is like that. Again, Pro Rel. We watch that to hope that we see something that does not normally happen. And then so in the Western Conference, you've got Sacramento Republic right now. They're kind of running things. But looking at the table, it's not wildly sparse in terms of point consistency. There's a lot of competitive clustering. There's definitely some teams like Hartford that have a total of 10 points in 18 matches. But I would say the average right now is probably closer to 27, and the winning clubs in each of the conferences are at 34. So they're 2 wins back.
Just accidentally win a few games, whoops, I'm in first.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you had touched on this earlier, but that is one of the best things that a league can ever have is that parity. I mean, again, we talked earlier about the total number of clubs that have that dynasty of wins, and it's at 2 right now for 2 teams. So I kind of think of it and go that's really exciting to know that there's going to be a variety. And now I hope RIFC starts their own dynasty right out the gate, but I do enjoy that more because nothing is more annoying than knowing that Manchester City is going to win again, and it's their season to lose.
8th time in a row,
right?
Bayern Munich on their 15th championship.
Yeah, is it 15?
No,
right now?
no,
it's 55, right?
I think it's 11.
I mean, but just
Dortmund almost had it.
I know,
Like,
but then again, it was
we don't-
theirs to lose, right?
They didn't want it.
Could you? Hey guys, we're going into the last 2 games of this season. I don't want the pressure of being champ. You know how many autographs we have to sign? I don't want that. Like, let's just go.
I
home.
can't drink all that bus top beer.
I can't
trying
play
to watch my
FIFA. I
figure.
have to be doing interviews. I don't want to do that. Yeah, no, but like that's insane. A decade of wins, like that doesn't happen a lot in sports. And when it does, it kind of creates like some nonsense. Like if you ask a football fan outside of New England, but New England does apply to it because they have a dynasty as well. I guarantee you the casual fair-weather fan of football will be one of 4 clubs that they're fans of. It'll be the 49ers for their dynasty. It'll be the Cowboys for their dynasty. It'll be the Patriots for their dynasty. Or it'll just be Green Bay Packers because like that's the team that Brett Favre was on, and then Aaron Rodgers, and they were cute or something like that. Like that's normally
It's not
how it goes.
because people like cheese.
I mean, that's why I'm a Packers fan. But anyways, it's boring. Like there's an excitement knowing that like you really have to struggle and you really have to go through it. So having said that, do you think you can list every club in USL Championship soccer?
No, but I can give it a go.
Hit me with your best
I'm
shot.
not cheating right now. I'm looking at a map of Arkansas, just so you know.
So hit me with the Eastern Conference first. How about that? Well, that way you don't like scatter because I might not even be able to track which clubs are which.
So we've got Hartford Athletic,
Crapford Athletic. Yep.
I think Loudon is. I don't actually know where that is, but I'm pretty sure.
But you know it's a club.
It's somewhere in the East Coast.
Yep, Loudon is one. It's in. Man, I should know this, but I think it's close to DC United. So if it's not Maryland, it's
sweet.
Virginia. It's like right around that area.
Pittsburgh is in
Got the
Pennsylvania.
Riverhounds. Yep.
Who else do we have? There's another club in Miami. Not the one with
Not the
not
Messi
the one with
FC.
not the Argentinian special.
What was it
Miami
you
FC?
called it? What did you call the new? You called it Inter Messi, not Inter
Inter
Miami.
Inter Messi.
Yep, you got Miami FC.
Then
Do you want a hint? I'll give you one hint.
Does Louisville count, or is that
Louisville's
is that
east.
in-
Yep.
Okay.
Do you say that because you don't know where Louisville is?
I
in the
do.
world?
I just don't know where the line.
So the line cuts off right now very
Because the West
cleanly
is like
in-
really big, and then all of a sudden the East is just like, yo, there's 100 states here and like
Right.
a small section.
right. So the West cuts off cleanly at Oklahoma.
Mississippi. Okay.
It's a little
Okay.
more
A little more
west of
west.
the Mississippi, but the Oklahoma is the cut, and then everything else is west. So
I'm pretty sure there's some more East teams.
you're out. Okay, I'll give you a hint for one of them. I'm not going to do the voice because I can't do the voice, but it's orgasmic.
Oh, okay. Mr. Ray Hudson himself.
Ray Hudson FC. Do you remember the name though?
The Tampa Bay Rowdies.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, I don't know if we mentioned this on the first. See, again, when you've done an episode and you don't know what went into the first one, I was looking online for Ray Hudson, and you can buy on Cameo him to do anything you want. So you can have him just record you a message, but he'll also do a professional recording for you, as much as professional as Ray Hudson can be. Kind of tempted to splash out and pay the $1,000 and something to have him do like the intro to this.
All right, where's our GoFundMe?
So we listeners, if you want to hear Ray Hudson in your ears, ridiculous. I will give him full license to say whatever he wants for a minute. And you could hear that every episode. Let's talk. Let's
Mail
partner.
a check to 4231 Rhode Island.
And Rhode Island FC, when you do start listening to this, if you want to do that for us, let's talk partnerships here. We can make that happen. But okay, so you got the Rowdies. You're only off by like 4 more, I think, but you're missing a big one that I think deserves acknowledgement. Actually, you're missing 2 big ones on the East Coast that I feel like deserve a special call out.
I don't do well on the spot. I didn't do.
So Indy 11, which
Okay,
is
yeah.
been one of the ones that have been like
Got a cool name too.
super cool name, right? Like it's soccer related. It's based on the city they're into. Like good job on the marketing on that one. And then I think just because it's fair that it said Charleston, the Battery. They're the oldest club,
Favorite Metallica song, yeah.
but they're the oldest club in USL's history right now in terms of organization. And it's not like they're that old, but they do have that pedigree. And then the ones you missed, Detroit City, they have a club. Memphis, so Memphis, it's like 901, I think. Maybe that's just the area code. Memphis person. And then the Legion, which made the deepest run into the Open Cup, Birmingham Legion, were the ones that were neglected from the true East Coast. And then you got one more. But wait, there's
One of
more.
us?
Then you've got Tulsa, which is in the.
Oh, they're in the.
They're
in the shadow zone right now.
Right, because like they are all by themselves. When OKC went away, like that was probably their punching bag. Like that was their fight. And right now they're just one little club hanging out in Oklahoma, right in the middle of both the East and West. So my guess is next year when Rhode Island FC does go live, if they choose to keep that many clubs on the East, then that'll be fine. We'll have the extra one. But if they choose to balance out the other side, then Tulsa's going to go back to the West, is my guess. Okay, so West Coast. Let's see what you can do on the West Coast.
So I've already named the Lights.
Yep.
There's the Switchbacks.
Yep.
You already mentioned New Mexico United.
Yep.
We also talked about Phoenix Rising this episode too. And we also talked about Sacktown.
We did.
There's one named after a band. Is it like the Roots or something?
So, hey, that's actually a good association. Oakland Roots, by the way, super cool jersey, super cool logo. When we get to the sickest kit episode, they are going to definitely be in the running for one of the best kits I've seen so far as a product. And then you told me something interesting about the Roots. Do you remember what you said in the...
Oh, yeah, and the lost episode.
We don't talk about the episode, but we're going to talk about the episode?
I don't remember, but it's something about they're offering sales up for their club in terms of like ownership.
Yeah, they're doing a split ownership.
In the way that like they do it in the Bundesliga where the fans actually own the teams.
Yeah, I don't know how much of the percentage. I looked it up briefly. I don't think it's like a 51-49 split. I think it may just be like 30% of the club. And I'm also thinking they're trying to find like big names to make purchases versus like you and I just buying one share of the club each.
And then being the Wrexham special.
No, even better, being the Brett Johnson 1% owner control. See, it all comes full circle in the pod, right?
Okay, there we go.
We become the directors of the Oakland Roots.
Look at me. I'm the director now.
While being commentators on Rhode Island FC. So yeah, so back on track. Roots, you got them. You got a couple more.
What are some other states over there?
Ironically, they're all kind of concentrated into two states at this point.
San Diego has one, right?
They do.
Oh yeah, doesn't Mr. Donovan own
Landon
that one?
Donovan is not own. I think he's the coach, maybe a partial sponsor, like owner.
He's
person.
Affiliated with the team.
Yeah.
So, didn't Texas have like 4 teams also?
So they have 3 right now with Austin. We don't know what's going on. And my favorite club, like if I had to have like a secondary club in the USL, is in this group.
Does El Paso have a team?
They do.
Okay.
But you got to say the name. I'm not going to let you just say like you got it right because this one's important.
So I've probably known and or seen it or read it. I'm drawing a blank right now.
El Paso Locomotive. You got to get on the train, gang.
Nice.
You got to get on the chugga chugga choo choo.
Definitely not copying that Russian team.
Oh yeah, no connection or affiliation to the legacy of Russian
Especially
sports.
now that they've been canceled.
Yeah, we don't talk. Oh, do you think that went through their mind? Like maybe we should just
Now blacklisted from Russia.
Yeah, it's fine. Do you think they've had like branding conversations? Like it would cost us $2 million.
Do you think there are other soccer nerds out there who would give them a hard time over or something like that? I mean,
oh man,
because the average person's gonna have no idea where that's from.
But it's still it has a Russian.
Maybe
it has
the
a Russian vibe.
Like if they're USL SJWs are like, I gotta change the name.
So remember earlier when I was
Slava
like,
Ukraine.
we gotta find those filler episodes in the back half of when there's no soccer on. We'll explore the dynamic of equity, equality, and and geo world politics in soccer. That'll be on the Patreon specials.
Is that also like part ASMR just to put people to sleep?
Oh man, could you? I didn't think about it, but I think one of my biggest fears now is finding out that we have an insanely high listening count, but it's just so that people can go to bed. That's my nightmare.
As long as they listen.
But are they?
Just don't tell us.
Oh man.
Well, tell us you listen, but don't tell us you're going to sleep.
So fun fact. That is actually a new added fear. But the other one is that we say something as part of our mannerisms or our language that becomes like a drinking game. So because during the pandemic, I got too heavy into podcast listening, and there was one that this person just continued to do this thing. It was like a tick. And so I made a drinking game out of it. And then 30 episodes in, they caught, someone spoiled it and they caught wind of it. So then they did this thing. I was like, I'm going to punish you. And I'm going to do this tick 45 times in a session. And it didn't end well for me that night. Are
you sure you finished that episode?
We'll never know. That is a fear of mine. Is I don't want to have that get caught. Because once you hear it, you just will never be able to not.
Matt did the thing. Time to drink.
Oh man. Okay, so you got the loyal. You just got locomotive, even though you get a partial credit for that. You got a couple clubs left. You got a couple clubs left.
There's another team in Tejas I didn't announce.
There's two more in Tejas.
Two dos más. I don't know. I think about my limit here with this. It's a learning experience.
You're along for the journey.
When I look at the table every single day to check where RFC are in the standings, I'm gonna have them all memorized. It's just picture in my brain.
Until the club's not even worth your attention, and oh yeah, they're in the league. I forgot about that one. But okay, I'll help you fill in the blanks for the rest. So one of them you could have cheated because we kind of already talked about the current champion, San Antonio FC. Then you've got the Toros out of Rio Grande Valley, RGV, which they have an amazing stadium. And when we get to the stadium episode, they are when we talk about travel, they may be one of the first few places I want to check out if we get lined up as such. And then you've got two more in the. I'm surprised you missed this one. The Orange County Soccer Club, or OCSC. They were originally the LA Blues, which is one of the oldest kind of, again, legacies of the Division II soccer pyramid.
Okay, yeah, I think I've seen them in a US Open Cup game 10 years ago against an MLS team.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And I will tell you this, for listeners, stop what you're doing. Go on socials and go look at a mock kit they have of something they may put to production for their players. It is the most ridiculous jersey. It has oranges and orange peels, just the fruit, just all over. And
is this like a Heffenweisen kit?
No, it should be.
Just
right?
drink it.
It should be, but it's reminiscent of, if you've ever seen the FC Dallas taco kit joke that they did a couple years ago with just tacos and squiggly lines and quesadillas and cactuses and stuff.
Oh, getting that cool 90s Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, it's like a 90
exactly.
Nice. And they did it for Orange, and I if I could support another club and I could also financially afford it, I would do it. But you guys should all go check it out, because again, I want to know what the possibilities are for when we do the Sickest Kit pod. I'm really excited about that. And then to round things off, you missed one team. They're newer, and it's totally understandable. But up in Fresno, you've got, or sorry, not Fresno. Oh man, I already made the mistake. Formerly from Fresno, now Monterey Bay. They're the Monterey Bay Union. So we put that name out there into the world. So that's the clubs. Apologies that took way too long to get to. If I were to ask you what is the biggest rivalry, whether it's manufactured or organic today, what would you take a stab at right now?
Biggest rivalry. I don't know.
So it's interesting because it would be newer since New Mexico hasn't been around, but it's New Mexico United and El Paso Locomotive.
They just really hate each other.
Again,
maybe they've got some past history, just not aware of, because when you ask who's the biggest rivalry, I'm trying to think of, you think of normal like history. It's like, okay, well, LA, Boston, everyone versus New York. Just like trying to think, and just nothing really screamed out at me, especially because in the USL markets, they're trying to go a lot more of these like, medium kind of towns that have the support there, but maybe just don't have a team to support.
Right. And I don't know. This stat came straight from USL. So when it's like, what's the biggest one? This could be manufactured. It could be manufactured the same way. What is it? The
so it's like
Galaxy,
the MLS
LAFC,
special that are like, what if you guys played each other 100 times in a row?
Right. Right. So it could be as artificial as what the El Tráfico. And then, but like also too, I don't think that's artificial anymore. I think those fans hate each other. I think those clubs hate each other. And like,
after,
they always show up.
especially after the most recent game at the Rose Bowl, like
what was that, 92,000 or something like that? Was it 80?
I think,
insane.
That's crazy.
Insane. And not for like a U.S. men's or women's national team, not for like any like kind of disqualifier or championship. Well, that's probably going to change immediately.
We'll see what happens.
What's the current ticket price on it? You were just telling me earlier today. We're in the 2000s again?
Yeah, they're playing in some Continental Cup or something against a Mexican team, and it's $1,200 a ticket or something.
My goodness. I'll be really curious to see if all those clubs move to bigger arenas instead of playing in their 20,000, soccer-specific stadiums just to get that cash grab. I don't blame them if they do.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, like we talked in the first episode, this is a big decade for U.S. soccer. I mean, they need to cash in, and those extra seats could be extra, new fans.
Agreed. So again, and listeners weigh in. If you think we got the rivalry wrong, if it's more of like a derby thing, derby. I've never known, is it derby or is it derby?
Depends what side of the Atlantic you're on, maybe.
Which one is it on this side? Is it derby?
I don't know.
Derby.
Or we talk about, or is it depends?
Arby's?
Is it horse racing?
Is it? So it's Arby's. Horse racing is Arby's. That's got to be.
I thought that was
They've
just
got
like
the meats, and it's horse meat.
Okay.
I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense now that you say.
we're what is it, Pepe Silva? We're putting clues together right now. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's just by proximity because those are very close. And I did see on the site like they love to pin the ones that were the closest to each other. Again, maybe it's manufactured. But what is an important takeaway from the statistics that they do have on their sites is that the average right now for attendance is 4,300 fans. And I thought that was pretty low considering that you've got clubs like Louisville and New Mexico United putting up like 10 to 12K numbers per game. So I looked into the data that they pulled for last season as the aggregate, and it's really interesting. I don't know why they do this because you'd think they'd be smarter in how they brand themselves, but they're counting those MLS 2 clubs in their data. And like when I looked at it, LA Galaxy 2 had 200 people show up to their game. Like that's terrible number. Like that is just terrible way to accumulate data. Like go with the median. Then don't do the average.
Yeah, that's one of those things where some more context is needed to really understand the true picture.
Right. But again, like I won't also pretend that there aren't clubs that are only barely fielding 3,000 to 4,000. But again, when you start removing those like zero, like those single, well maybe not single, but like triple digit club attendances. Like this number should probably be closer to like 6,500, maybe 6,000 flat. But they're all growing, and that's the great part. So we're starting to run really long, so we need to get going on some of this other stuff here. You ready to jump into league play?
Time trials? We gotta speed this up.
I got one pace. So going into the actual the performance of USL Championship, I really like their setup here. I think it's the right way to do things, and I wish that other leagues would emulate this across the board. But it's very traditional. It's you play every opponent in your conference twice. You have one home, you have one away, and then if you're in the East or West playing the opposite conference, you have an additional 12 games, and 6 of those will be matched up against a club at your home, and then the other 6 will be away, and you will only play each of them once. So again, when we talk about parity, when we talk about balance, there, because I think even MLS today has some of that where I was just reading earlier, I forget which club, but they hadn't played that club in 3 years. How does that happen?
That's crazy. When I started watching the MLS 13-ish years ago, something like that. I mean, I think it was a similar setup where there wasn't so many teams play each other home and away. Maybe a few extra thrown in there just to balance it out. But like, that's one of the cool things about soccer is that they have such that balanced playing field of like, well, you all kind of had the same opportunities to win. Not like, well, in our division is really tough and we play them way too many times and we get beat up on, and the other weaker divisions, we play these guys like once every few years.
Which that's how baseball works. Like when you look at some of the divisions and the way those are set up, there are teams that dominate and they just run away with it and they put up insane win percentages because they're beating up on, people that aren't putting a competitive product out. And then you see other ones where like they're all really good and they're all trying to just get that top spot and then hope they can get a wild card.
By the time they come out of it, they're all beaten and bruised up.
Yeah. So I love this. I love this style. And I hope that as we continue to expand, it just gets more and more closer to, nobody really knows how many clubs USL really wants. And now with Pro-Rel, I don't know where they would maybe they keep it at like 24 and then it's because like, what's the magic number? It's 40 games would put you, so 20 clubs, right? That's what the Premier League does. So
yeah, so they have 38, but I know a few of the leagues below them actually if it like go up to as much as 24 teams just because they don't have as many other competitions. I don't know if we'd be looking at something like that, but it's definitely possible to have a little more than 20. But yeah, once the further you go up, like 25 teams would put you at 48 games or something like that. Would probably be too
you couldn't
much,
play everyone. Yeah, that parity would go away. So either they have to go bonkers and do 20 per conference and have 40, and then you never see the other side, and it's a true like gentleman's challenge of like which conference produced the better champion. But now with Pro-Rel, I wouldn't mind seeing like 4 of these teams get knocked out in the next 3 years and brought down and keep it at 20. But anyways, going into the playoffs. Now this is where I don't like the system. And at first I thought I did, and then I read through it again, and I'm not happy with this. And I hope that they really take a reflection on this now with Pro-Rel, meaning maybe more like your table standings do have the merit and the importance. Because right now the way it works is first of all, 16 clubs make it in to the playoffs. So it's more than half. That's insane. That's too that does not reward club performance in any capacity in a meaningful way. And what's worse about it is since it's the top 8 and not the top 6, everything in the tournament draw is single seed all the way through to the end. And they don't reset the standings in the seeding. So it's one of those systems, and MLS adopted this a few years ago, and I've hated it ever since, where if you're one of the top 4 clubs and you win everything outright, you will host every game in the playoffs. And for growing a league, that is the worst thing you could do. So if my club makes it in, but we seed 8th, and we're up against seed 2, and we get one shot at winning that game, and we're going away. And if we want to say for the first round, because there are so many teams, we need to filter that out, that's fine. But then you start getting into those like matches closer to like what would be a standard, semi-conference or, going into the final itself. And there's no dual leg system. So let's say I am literally the 16th seeded team and I have to play then, 5 games to win the whole thing. I'm playing 5 away games to win everything. But what's worse is I don't get to do any of that in front of my fans. I don't get to generate additional interest in the soccer sport. I don't get to do any of that stuff. And like that doesn't help grow a league. And I think that they need to revisit that in the years to come.
Yeah, it's tough when the bigger teams are always hosting the smaller ones and that they can't like really share that, like ticket revenue and things like that. There's lots of talk of that in like the Premier League, not the Premier League, but like the EFL, the cups that they do, where like a smaller team, for instance, like let's just throw out Luton Town hosting a Manchester City, like that's going to be a huge draw for them and make a lot of money, and maybe even get some more fans in the Luton area to kind of like really get behind the team.
Right, like you don't have to be a fan of Man City to enjoy soccer. You can enjoy Luton Town instead.
Yeah, and then if the thing is, if the big team that's already got a bunch of fans anyway, they've got all the money, they like, they don't need it. But some of these smaller markets, when you kind of spread it around, the only thing is that like when it comes to playoffs, it's a very like American thing. So like obviously that this is our spin on soccer in a way, right? We don't. Other leagues just kind of go off like, well, who had the best, winning record? Well, they won the league.
Yeah, but playoff wise, most sports do some sort of competition of equals, right? Except for the Super Bowl, which is met in a neutral ground, and the FA Cup is a perfect example of kind of where you were going. That's a
Wembley,
and Wembley, right? And we don't have that. Like, do we have a Wembley in America?
I don't like a big stadium that really doesn't have a team per se. Not that I'm aware of.
Or even more so, like soccer specific.
It'd have to be like a neutral venue. You're just like, this NFL stadium.
I think there was like the Silver Dome in Michigan before it like collapsed. Like I don't see.
Yeah, but you don't want to
point,
extend it too much, but like. Maybe 2 legs is where you go with this, and you just cut the amount of team. Like the
semis. The semis is the perfect place to say, hey, like you made it through the wild cards. Your seeding, your positioning got you into the first one, but the 4 clubs that go through the semi-conference finals and then the conference finals, they should play 2 extra games, and then every team gets their shot. Because the final, the way we work this as a playoff, it has to be a single game setup, and that would go then to the final, the team with the best record at that point. But like all of those games in between shouldn't just be one club getting to host 5 games because they had the best record for the year. I know that contradicts how I said earlier about like I love the consistency and like everyone gets their shot, but like not in the playoff package. And again, if Pro Rel does come into the league, like do we even do do we do playoffs?
So you still have to,
or does it become like an interleague cup and that's what you fight for? Like as like an open cup, but only for USL 2.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be very interesting. Is that if we try and just mimic European soccer in that say you know what, screw the playoffs, but we're gonna have like a final still. We'll have our our whatever our equivalent is to the FA Cup, but it's only USL teams and it's the USL pyramid.
Right. It's only for USL. By USL
sure,
for
maybe,
USL.
Maybe you're a tier or 2 down, but. Maybe you end up having a good run. You make it all the way to the final,
Well, and I don't think we covered this. This is really, we really got to work on our show notes. But USL 2 is actually amateur. It's not professional. It's in the same realm of like MLS Next, like those like weird leagues that aren't like the NISA or like the.
Yeah, and I mean I've seen in England there's occasionally a random story of an amateur team. They're like, what are you still doing here? You made it past these rounds. Well, no, like
I know,
but even smaller than that, like it's like wow,
right? Or like Iceland, how they don't have a football squad that plays like all the time together. They're dentists and lawyers and real estate agents, and then they get together for friendlies, and then they go represent their country. So.
Yeah, like some of the smaller nations in the UEFA, like San Marino or something.
Or like when we were beating up on Kitts and the islands.
Kitts and Nevis,
yeah. Which, by the way, Gold Cup blowout. Like just what a way to go out right there.
Yeah, I don't know. We're in between coaches, fielding, a second string to a certain extent.
It was B squad. It was B squad.
So
I don't know if you saw, but people were asking for Greg Berhalter to be removed because of the performance, not realizing that he actually hasn't resumed responsibilities for he literally
or just somehow it's his fault.
He can't win. Like the guy's never going to be able to win.
Because if he would have put Gino.
So, but I'll be curious to see how Pro Rel affects this. If it doesn't affect it and we continue with the champion system the way it is, I really hope they work through that seeding system because, again, like a new club, they make the playoffs and then we never, that's not how people are used to thinking about things per se. I think it would be a benefit to unpack that. But moving on for the sake of time. Player talent. So this one was the most interesting thing because there was not a lot of consistent information about players in how the league happens. So I can't even tell you yet if there's like a bona fide CBA.
It's classified information.
I don't have the clearance. But seriously, like there's talks that there is a CBA. There's talks that the CBA is kind of like a shell of an actual organization to protect the player, like bargaining agreement. That there's work to get that done. I don't have enough information yet to be able to say something. I can't even tell you the salaries. From what I've picked up from sources that like make claims that I can't vet, that it's just a mixed bag. Like players can be making $27,000 a year, which equates to like a $2,700 a month minimum salary package, all the way up to $100,000 for like what we would consider more often like your like DP kind of like aging Eurostar or like someone who just has a lot of talent. There is requirements that players do have like packages around like salary for like their housing, like food, insurance, and whatnot. But I can't make heads or tails of a lot of that. The only thing that, and this does make sense, but the only thing that I can establish as a source of truth is that a majority of the league plays with free agents. They don't have the financial firepower to go and make acquisitions to strengthen the team. So everyone that they pick up, whether it's collegiate, it's domestic league players, like it's interleague, it very rarely is there a transfer fee associated or attached to that. So I don't know if that hurts the league. I don't know if we'll see that change in the future.
It makes sense with kind of where the league is at.
It does.
You know, maybe the future, things like that will change, but
no, 100%. I don't disagree with it, but I must make building a talented roster so much more difficult, right? Like we talk about like doing like a FIFA Ultimate Team, and it's like I want this person. I want the Pep Guardiola. Like how much money do I have? Oh, I have 20 billion. Okay, I want these 3 players, right? It's got to be so much more challenging to find in your system, and I can't wait till when we dive in on Coach Kano's like methodology of what he wants to build this team as. But it must be just the most difficult thing on the world to build a team from paper and popsicle sticks.
yeah, I mean, if you can, figure that out, it could really like do a number for your coaching CV. If you can sit there and piece together, it probably, I don't know for sure, but just maybe educated guess, requires that a lot more coaches be more flexible in terms of almost like, I can't be too picky on what I'm going to get. We have a scouting department and whatnot, and they get me guys who are trying a similar mold, but I might just have to kind of play to their talents and see, okay, how do I effectively use what I have in my toolbox and create some tactics that like work for us?
Right. There's more of a compromise than a forced system on players. Right. I agree. And then on the other side of that coin, when we talk about player talent and salaries, we still are starting to see some big transitions out of the league, right? And sending players off and making those big sales. So Josh Winder just went to Benfica from Louisville, $1.2 million for a player out of USL. That's
Not bad, yeah.
It's not too shabby. I would be curious to understand how much of the money Louisville is allowed to use, and I think we can just jump to that now because that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in like the strategy of USL. But what I've noticed with looking into like the financial performance is the league is all about sharing its overall league like health, but it doesn't get a lot into actual club not relegation. See, that word is going to haunt me now. Regulations, and I can't make heads or tails of if there are salary caps, if there are requirements on like you can only spend X amount of money if you make it. I know how the MLS system works exclusively because every player is under MLS contract. They're not actually associated to the club. Like so Messi,
off the top of your head, I had to get a tattoo of Wham Bam Gam Thank You Ma'am to understand like, everyone's like, which one is that?
I still have arguments on Gam versus Jam, and it goes back to like the GIF versus GIF conversation.
So, like, what's better, jam or jelly?
But so I do know what each of them, like I know what each of those models work in the MLS. I don't necessarily know the intricacy of how they like can be stacked upon each other or cancel each other out. That I always learn something new each. Like the DPU 22 rule, I didn't know. Like if you do a DP that's under the age of 22, it actually has additional modifiers to how much you can lower other U22 players. So you can have really insane youth product talent and pay like a fraction of what you would have to pay in their acquisition, not necessarily their salary. So I don't know is what I'm saying. Like if a team wants to like make that kind of big purchase, I don't know that there's any mechanisms yet within the league. So I'm hoping I can learn more. I've actually requested from USL, like, can someone walk me through some of those technicals? If I can't find it, I'm going to reach out to other podcast hosts from the league and see if they already know.
Deep dive into like the dark zone of YouTube, the USL side.
You got to get through 16 cat videos first, and then a couple fail armies, and that's when you get into the dark side of YouTube. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. And so to kind of like wrap things up with the USL, I think it's really important to also educate listeners on where they can watch it. So, Jason, do you know where we can send people right now if they were wanting to get kind of more curious with the league's performance and games today?
So we are not sponsored, but you can if you got one of those ESPN Plus subscriptions, which actually, you know, they've got a lot of soccer on there.
They do.
So they also have USL on there too. I know they've got some sort of weird hierarchy triangle with Hulu and Disney. You know, if you
gotta get the package.
Yeah,
so we're talking about pyramids today. That's
all
the
of the
package.
above.
Yeah, the triangle package.
And then USL's got an official YouTube channel, which has got a lot of content on there.
Yeah,
well.
I've been watching a lot of the highlights. They like to do the quick game recaps, which I think is important because not everyone will have ESPN Plus, so they can get those grabs. So if you want to start seeing how bad Hartford is up front, you can start drinking in the misery tears there. What's interesting is I did see that ESPN has made commitments to start bringing games back to like their secondary channels. So USL's not in like the ESPN level yet, but I've seen it on ESPN2. It is not on the Ocho. Don't make that joke.
I was just gonna say, we're gonna dethrone like some random like blackjack tournament?
Oh yeah, like what random sport had to get removed to get us? It's lawn darts, Portuguese lawn darts. So that's that. What I did also think was really interesting though is, according to what I read, and we'll have to wait till the end of the season to confirm, but the playoff mechanics though are exclusively shown on ESPN Deportes. So I don't know why.
I
know the audience that they may be pandering to for soccer product, but like I'm not really sure.
Which is interesting. I don't know what the makeup of the USL is.
We just spent an hour covering the makeup of the USL.
Sorry. Let me be more specific in terms of like where are we pulling talent from, right? So when MLS does that, I understand because you have certain teams who are like really trying to reach out and get a lot of like Mexican and Mexican American, even some South American talent. So that kind of makes sense that they will maybe try and push some of those games onto those like Spanish language channels. But yeah, I'm just really curious then what kind of like in terms of what the makeup of the USL. Because what you see in a lot of, not to go on for a crazy tangent, but on the lower leagues in the various countries, what you end up seeing is it tends up to be a lot of the nationality of the nation that they're playing in, right? So like the lower divisions of the English team of tiers.
Just the lads, just the boys.
It's just the lads. And similar thing you probably see in other nations, and then a lot of the foreign talent, as they get good, start to, would go abroad. I'm kind of generalizing, but, you're going to see a larger portion of the makeup of those lower divisions of, whatever nation your league is in.
So I listened to an interview with Michael Parkhurst, one of the founders of Rhode Island FC, and he expressed that they're going to let the coach kind of determine what that will look like if he wants to bring in the veterans for the first 3 years and then see what the performance of that looks like, or if we bring in like things and we need to start thinking and anticipating a youth academy or a partnership with the existing club, youth academy clubs that exist within Rhode Island today. So he kind of was leaving that up to the strategy that the front office was going to build around that vision. But he did mention that his understanding of kind of the roster dynamic of players in the USL is it's a mixed bag of, your homegrown players, whether that's to the state or like truly internally to the club, collegiate players that, and you see this all the time with like the MLS draft, like 36 players make it into MLS, and then very few ever really penetrate like first team rosters. But there's all those other kids that they come out of Stanford. They played really good soccer and they don't even make it to the draft. So I'm assuming that those are some pickups as well. And then you get those domestic league players that they can't find a new home as a journeyman, and it's probably specifically MLS, and so they get picked up that way too. So I imagine it's going to be a little bit of a collection of that kind of approach, especially because we won't have youth at the beginning in terms of an academy. So, but it'll be curious to see.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that pans out for us, and then as we start to learn more about the league, watch more to really kind of get a feel and understand for what the talent pool is throughout the league and what maybe types of players certain teams are going after.
Agreed.
I think we've got off on a little tangent here.
Man,
the street lights are on. I think my mom's calling.
If you had told me this would be running this long for this episode,
Yeah, we're gonna have to end on a cliffhanger, part 2.
next time on. So to wrap things up, I think we've been comparing a lot tonight to MLS, and especially if they're trying to differentiate themselves. I think the main takeaways are we don't know if there's roster salary caps. There's definitely not a DP mechanic because there's no one making those kinds of $1 million contracts for USL clubs that we know of. But there is one interesting thing, and we'll pick up on it in the later episodes. But I noticed that you can basically bring your entire squad with you for game day. So it's not like you have 30 on your club, you have like 4 which are provisional emergency or injury slots, and then you bring like your 18. You can bring 23, 24 players with you on game days. So from a tactics perspective, I'd be really interested to see like what a coach's strategy is, like going into the 45th minute, what in the dying minutes of the game, like what do you need to do? Like, screw it, we're going to send 5, attacking players in. I mean, I know you can't make 5 subs, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to look up some of what the rules are when these. Do the rosters not have to be locked in a sense of like?
So the starting 11 does, from what I've understood, but you can literally travel like game day, dressed in kit. You can bring the other 12 players at that point. Is that the right math? Yeah, 12 players along. So you have a whole other team that you can field. So the strategy becomes much more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like if you need a player that you maybe didn't want to bring, but suddenly that's exactly who you need. I'll be really curious to see what that looks like. And then, so those are the differences I could immediately call out between USL and MLS. But I think it's also important that we talk about USL's kind of setup and what it is and what it isn't, kind of just to kind of get back to those earlier statements. So one, this league is not at risk. I hear a lot of times when I ask people like, oh, isn't it that league that's going to like fold any day now? The club, I keep saying the club, the league
Lies
is
and
not,
slander.
right? It's like the stadium issue all over again. The league is financially healthy. They have been making a profit since 2016. So 2011 was when it started as USL Pro. By 2016, they were making a profit. Now they're making the millions of profits with a fully fledged system. Like we're talking, like all of the marketing. We're talking about like your HR, your athletic department, your sporting acquisition department, like everything you need to make the league viable. It's not 3 people in a laptop like this operation running this show, and so they're financially stable. Right now, the range rate for an expansion fee, which again, interesting for Pro Rel, is $5 million. So it's like a club can't just come in because they've got some shoes, they got some boots, and they want to play ball. Like that's not how this works. And that, in fact, is a higher increase on when we talk about expansion fees than actually the MLS. It's expanded. It's not as high of a dollar amount, but it probably started at $5 and like an IOU Monopoly card, and now it's at that 5 million range. So the league is doing just fine, and don't let anyone say that that's an issue. And also, too, they're not competing with MLS. Like I know this Division 1 topic of Pro Rel is now like the hot topic, but they're doing it to remain viable so they never have to risk being a secondary market or being the underdog. They're trying to make they're calling their shot in this space. Like, but if it doesn't happen, this league will continue to be perfectly fine on its own.
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing you would worry about there is if we don't look more for differentiation with like pro rel or something else per se. There's probably like a threshold, right, of where the league can reach. I think because
I
you
don't
always
know.
have the big brother over there. He's like, oh look how cool I am.
But so here's the thing.
I got Messi.
I don't know that I agree with that, and we can talk about it on another episode, because the way I see it is that this league is penetrating markets that would normally be unserviceable by an entity like Major League Soccer or any major league sport. Like where they're thriving, like you said, is in places that like they don't have anything else. And that's not to say then, oh, there isn't an appetite and that's all we can do, but it's where we see the strongest resonation, right? So if New Mexico United is getting the entire state of New Mexico behind it, tell me another sport in New Mexico.
It's red or green, right? You picked the color of the sauce on the burrito.
But that's my point, right? So like I don't know the population of New Mexico, but I'm going to say it's at least like 4 million people. Maybe it's 2. But you have 2 million people suddenly becoming a fan of New Mexico United soccer. That's a big deal. That's bigger than trying to like get a club in, I don't know, insert capital city here. I don't know. And so when you look at that kind of opportunity, I think the league could thrive on its own without being in those markets where there's already a major sporting product. It doesn't even have to be soccer. And in fact, I'll go further and say I think the clubs that are competing in cities where there is an MLS product are the most at risk. So San Diego Loyal, now that San Diego Mix Footface or whatever they're opening up,
whatever they're called.
That's a risk, and I don't think the Loyal deserve that. I mean,
how many times do you think people buy Miami FC tickets thinking they're gonna go see Messi?
You know what? I'm sure it'll
hey,
happen.
Good for them. Make some extra money this year.
I know, but like not good for like the audience. The fan will immediately be
some guy.
Only if they sign a player like Leonard Messi, and they have him on the squad, so at least you can feel like you almost saw it. Like you gotta have that.
Do USL teams have like mascots?
We're gonna talk about that.
We're
gonna talk about that. So I know where you're going. We're gonna talk about that in a future episode. But I do think that those clubs are the most at risk. I think that's why Austin Bold left immediately, because they couldn't compete with Austin FC, and that's a problem. So like I think there's viability in finding cities and markets where there's no competing sport product at all, or when there's just the ability for us to not compete with our immediate big brother that's in the room with us right now. So I don't know about that. We can definitely talk about it more, and maybe Pro Rel's still the future. But I do want to say that what I think is really important is I believe that the age of the feeder system of the league, like all the MLS2 teams are gone, right? They're now in the next pro system, so we're not going to worry about that. I think those teams hurt the league. I really like if you can't get excited, if you can't show up for an academy team.
Oh yeah, definitely, because those are not teams with an identity. They're a number 2, right? And like you said, like 200 people watch LA Galaxy 2. No one cares about that. They're just like, well, I wonder if one of these guys will start for LA Galaxy in a few years or something. That's pretty much it.
Right.
It's something to do on a Wednesday night, and I live down the street,
and I don't have cable TV,
and my son plays for this team.
Oh man. So I think that day and age is gone. I don't think that we'll see any more of that. And again, with the affiliation part, that's why I brought up Loudon, because they're the last one truly connected to the product, and they're not any intention of leaving or going into MLS Next or anything like that. But I am curious if any of these teams that are remaining are going to try to still make a bid for an MLS expansion.
I think it's definitely possible. If we find ourselves moving to a pro rel state, I wonder, would some of the big boys be like, or some of the bigger teams are like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. And it's like, let me go over here and get my golden ticket.
That's a problem for 50 years down the road.
Yeah,
when they
that's
catch
a problem.
Us and
That's
we
a
have
problem
to be...
for future USL.
Right. So I don't have enough knowledge yet on if those teams are still actively putting. I think Don Garber said there was two more expansion spots that he wanted to do. I don't know. I might be. That might be
some like number written on his wall, and they're just not there yet.
But again, I think he's lied though, because I think he said that number. Like he said different numbers each time
he's just winging it.
Yeah, like how much more money can I make on this pyramid scheme? So I'll be really curious about that. But hey, listen, I think we set out to do what we wanted to do today. We talked about USL. We talked about the clubs in general. Gave a little bit of the backstory. Pro Rel is definitely going to be a continuation of conversation to come. And yeah, so I think there's really only one last thing I want to ask you today to lock in. Who are your predictions to win 2023 USL Championship?
Do you remember who I said in the previous version, like 2.0?
I do remember.
Okay. Because I don't.
Do you want me to tell you, or do you want to take a guess and I'll tell you if that was right?
I think we're gonna go with Tauros.
Okay.
The one that's named after the Pokemon or whatever. That one that's supposed to got the really cool stadium.
Yeah,
we're gonna go with them.
Okay, so if they win and they're in the we're gonna go watch the final this year. Then how about that?
Okay.
Road trip down to Texas in November. I'm sure that's fine weather, right?
Yeah, it's perfectly
perfect.
Fine. There's no power energy.
That's in February,
right?
That's February.
Okay,
yeah,
cool,
that's
cool,
when they get
cool,
those
cool.
freezes. I'm going with San Antonio Locomotive. Train gang up. You got it. You got to train gang while you can.
Choo choo.
Oh man, it's gonna be a wild ride. I can't wait to make any more mistakes on this podcast with you, buddy.
Nonstop until we figure it out.
So, how about you get us out of here and tell the people who've dealt with us and managed to listen this long.
All right, guys, if you're still here, we have a Twitter at RIFC Podcast. We got a new one called Threads. Definitely not anything that's been stolen from another company, as far as I'm aware of. That one is at RIFC Podcast. There is an Instagram at Raising Anchor, and we do own a website. We have a website address. I don't think it goes anywhere right now.
By the time they listen, there'll be something
maybe
there.
By the time we have some people
little
listen
dancing
to this,
soccer ball gif or something.
We'll figure something out there. That's going to be RaisingAnchorPodcast.com.
Hey man, love you. Thanks for talking with me. Can't wait to do it again.
Love you too, buddy. Catch you guys later.